Welcome, fellow plebs. My name is Sean, and this is
Tribunus Plebis.
And welcome back, everybody, to another episode. Thank you for being here. Okay, so Donald Trump's home got its door politely knocked on and gently looked over by some FBI agents because he apparently, allegedly, stole some sort of top secret and confidential documents, possibly pertaining even to the nuclear arsenal or something like that. But to me, whatever it was exactly that he did or didn't do isn't terribly important. Although he almost certainly did something, right? Because of course he did, because he's an elite scumbag. But anyway, liberals are actually celebrating like this will actually lead to something, and conservatives are all aflutter because their king has been embarrassed or something. I don't know. I don't know how these people think sometimes. Some conservative pundits are even calling for the defunding and abolishment of the FBI, a stance which just a handful of days ago, these same people would have said was completely insane, which leads to the first point I want to make here. When I say we need to defund the police because of how they murder innocent people on the regular in this country, or that police should be abolished because they are corrupt, lazy, power-mad, villainous gangsters who prey upon the oppressed, the poor, and the powerless, like jackals picking off slow antelope, they say that I'm mad. They say that this is unthinkable. It's untenable. It's evil even. Shit, it's either communism or totalitarianism or whatever other code word they have for not the people I like in power. They argue the cops are good. They are a force for good, that they uphold the law and the law should be upheld at all costs, even at the cost of innocent lives. Like, it's okay for the policing in this country to be systemically racist. It's okay for the poor and the powerless to be run down, abused, hurt, harmed, shot, hit, kicked, and murdered. They support laws that make it legal for cops to rape those in their custody and under arrest. Seriously, that stuff actually exists. Think about that for a minute. They do all of that. They protect, worship, deify, and verbally fillet the police in spite of all of that. In spite of the corruption, in spite of the malfeasance, in spite of the harm, in spite of the dead bodies, in spite of the untested rape kits, in spite of the indifference to the suffering of poor and minorities, and in spite of the brutal suppression and over-policing of certain zip codes. All that, and they have always and repeatedly protected these monsters. They even say things like that all people should be equal under the law while they're at it. And now today, suddenly, the script flipped. Why? Because a celebrity that they like got their home searched. Last episode, I talked a bit about parasocial relationships and what they do to our brains. I don't want to rehash the entire subject again, but the nickel version is basically this. Someone with a platform, in this case Trump, with everything from television interviews, print stuff, radio interviews, and everything else, but especially via Twitter in the conservative pundit sphere, essentially, he dumps info at us. The parasocial relationship is how the audience feels about the person talking, how much they consider them a friend, and especially a leader. And well, if you have ever seen the goobers who attend Trump rallies, I think you'll get an idea of what I'm talking about here. And before I go on, for the normies out there, think about how you feel about your favorite podcaster. Last episode, I used Joe Rogan as an example, but it could be anyone. Two left for Rogan? Do you listen to ContraPoints? Do you feel like you know Natalie? You're on a first-name basis with her? You are. I see the discussions about her online. That is parasocial. The host shares so much, even, relatively banal sorts of information. And then we start to feel like we know them, like they're our friend. In extreme situations, we pay to attend rallies in large auditoriums and wear shirts with their names on them and buy their merchandise, and we want them to be our president and believe nothing bad about them and wave flags and pump our fists and scream our throats raw as we undulate and sweat and exult in the mass adulation of some rich asshat dork in a red snapback. Like I said last episode, it's very culty. And hello there, everybody. As most of you probably know, this podcast takes a lot of time and effort to put together and, to get out there for you good folks to listen to. And you, our listeners, can help us by liking and subscribing on YouTube. So please take a second to click those little buttons. It helps a ton. And if you are feeling just a little bit more generous and you enjoy what we do here at Tribunus Plebis Media, you can help us earn just a little bit of money for the large amount of labor that we put into this thing by signing up on our Buy Me a Coffee page, where you can make a one-time donation or sign up for a recurring monthly subscription. We do all of this for free, and we will never run ads in our works. But any contributions really do help keep the show going and improving. The page address is buymeacoffee.com/TribunusPlebis. And of course, all links will be in the show notes and descriptions wherever you are listening or watching. Thank you. And now, back to the episode. So back to Trump in Mar-a-Lago. He's basically cultivated a cult. These people aren't upset that law enforcement is overstepping any bounds. Their complete lack of being truly upset about these same police routinely exploding people's heads with supersonic lead speaks to that fact. The thing that makes this event truly abhorrent in these absolute dorks is that this sort of force has been used against somebody with actual power and somebody who actually resembles themselves. And no, this isn't incorrect. This is literally their main problem here. Never have they cared about search warrants, no-knock raids, cops destroying homes looking for grams of weed, dead children, dead minorities, or rape victims being ignored and shamed. No, never any of that, because those people don't have power. These people view Trump as Daddy Trump, as their power daddy, their savior. And power can never be the target in these people's minds. Maybe my favorite line of this whole conservative meltdown is this one, a tweet from the official account for the Republican House Committee on the Judiciary. It said this, quote, "If they can do it to a former president, imagine what they can do to you," end quote. You see how these absolute scum dorks never said, hey, if they can do it to George Floyd, they can do it to you. They can do it to the president even. Of course not, because the powerless don't count. The powerful never see themselves attacked when Eric Garner is choked to death by a bad cop, as if a good one exists right now, right? And we can't leave off the very healthy layers of classism and racism as well. Why would Lauren Boebert ever consider that cops killing blacks at an inordinate rate would affect her or her pedo husband? Why would Marjorie Taylor Greene ever think that she'd be affected by police violence? She wouldn't, because she's a racist Christian white nationalist. I sense that some of you might not believe me.
Not those people. That's not who the Republican Party should represent. We need to be the party of nationalism, and I'm a Christian, and I say it proudly. We should be Christian nationalists. And when Republicans learn to represent most of the people that vote for them, then we will be the party that continues to grow without having to chase down certain identities or chase down, certain segments of people. We just need to represent Americans, and most Americans know it's disgusting. And all of us are fed up with it. But when I said that I'm a Christian nationalist, I have nothing to be ashamed of, because that's what most Americans are. We're proud of our faith.
I do my best not to lie to you guys. It was power under attack to these sycophantic dorks when they saw FBI agents walking around Donald Trump's home, not a person. A shibboleth, maybe? Does that fit here? A totem? And sadly, some of their response is actually correct, even if its genesis is from the soulless pit of hate that they all seem to be birthed of and to pull their strength from. Cops actually are bad. Policing is actually bad. They actually do need to be defunded and eventually abolished. But again, like I've said a bunch of times about when guys like Tucker Carlson start talking about a subject in a way that we, as leftists, think sounds okay, it's not okay. Marjorie Taylor Greene wants the FBI to be defunded because her totem of power was attacked, and because she wants to create a Christian nationalist whites-only country. The goal of leftists and Taylor Greene are not the same, not even close to the same. Do not let these ghouls fool you into thinking that they're on your side, not one little bit. And what do I think about a former president having their home raided, as a concept? I enjoy it. I mean, why not? I don't think anything will really come of it. Trump probably actually did have documents he shouldn't have, and the FBI probably just collected them and brought them to wherever they belong. None of this is exactly hard to believe. But at the end of the day, I don't imagine much, if anything, will happen to him. Which is just another reason to hate the police and the politicians and the powerful, right? Because they never feel the pain when they break the law. Reality Winner stole a single document and leaked it to a news site, The Intercept, which published it. Reality Winner was a hero and was sentenced to over 5 years of prison. Julian Assange, another hero, never even stole anything. He just published documents as reporters can and should do. And the United States government is dead set on murdering that man for exposing their secrets. Chelsea Manning, the person who leaked the documents that Assange published, spent 7 years in prison for her heroic actions. Trump? He will just continue to golf. Listen, every president of my lifetime should be dragged to The Hague in handcuffs and be found guilty of war crimes and/or crimes against humanity. Every single one of them, no exceptions. All of them. Hell, probably all of the presidents did something that they should have to answer for, right? And before this raid, one of the persistent themes amongst the haughty elite talking heads and current and former politicians and government appointees was that presidents shouldn't face legal repercussions for things that they did in office as president. This was said and argued for openly and extensively, that a president who committed crimes in office was effectively above the law. They would say it shouldn't be done, they shouldn't be charged, and then ask the listeners something like, if they do it to President Smith, then they'll do it to a president you voted for as well. Would we want that? And they just let that question linger. They just let it hang in the air like a warning. Like, boy, that sure would be a can of worms, wouldn't it? Making criminals face the consequences of their actions? So, yeah, I would want criminals, especially war criminals, to be held accountable for their crimes. Of course. Who the hell wouldn't want that? Only complete and utter sociopaths who worship power over humanity, who lift power wielders over those who they wield power over, and who belong to the classes which are born into power, would not want war criminals to face their crimes. The same sorts of people who see police gun down people merely for not behaving perfectly, while some over-steroided, power-mad loser with trembling hands waves a gun in their face while screaming contradicting orders, while a veritable flume of donut sweat gushes down their rage-blotched, porcine faces before their inferior cop genetics finally get the better of them and they squeeze their eyes shut in terror and they blind fire their entire magazine into a scared teenager's chest and then have the audacity to say that they feared for their life. Conservatives, and this includes nearly every Democrat, by the way, they demand that the powerful be let off the hook. But a poor person selling weed or playing music too loud or drinking in public, nah, throw the book at them. Shit, go kill that guy for selling Lucy's on the corner, right? No problem. You won't even lose your job for 5 full years while the powers that be try to run the numbers on whether they should fire a murderer from the police force. Seriously, the guy who finally fired the murderer of Eric Garner said it was an incredibly difficult decision which he was forced to wrestle with. That's how depraved these people are. They can't even get behind firing murderers from the police force. Poor people must pay the full, unjustifiably high price for all of their actions, up to and including Judge Dredd-style judgment and murder. But not the powerful. They should never be held accountable for their criminality, because if we hold the powerful accountable, then, I don't know, I guess the world ends or something. And see, here's the thing. When police drop kick a door at 2 a.m. and fire blindly into an apartment and murder people, nobody with any power says, if they can do that to those poor people, then they can do that to the president. They just say that the dead people deserved it and go back to their wine and cheese. But when an ex-president gets caught up, even in a minor way, they start to worry. They say that if they can do that to an ex-president, then they can do that to us, meaning white upper-class people with power. The sort of people who wave to cops, call the pigs heroes, and never go to jail over a weed joint or a bench warrant for a $200 fine. The sort of people who teach their children to trust the cops, who are there to protect their property from the pores of the world. I know those people because I was taught these very things as a child by these same sorts of people, as a white child in a safe town. Sadly, these conservatives and liberals have this issue ass backwards. The world should rely on that first statement, that if they can do this to a poor person, then they can do it to the rich and powerful as well. But it doesn't. That's not why cops exist. So at the end of the day, fuck Trump. Fuck all these rich, powerful dorks and ghouls. Is the FBI good? No. Can I say that and still think it's fine for them to gently search the home of a former president who probably broke the law? Yes. Even people who shouldn't exist can do a good thing. But still, ACAB. And speaking of cops being bastards, let's talk about the Breonna Taylor murder and what's going on with the cops involved in it. Now, I talked about this case before, I believe, right after it happened. And the belief that this was a complete crap show and little more than straight-up murder was looked upon with derision by the conservative and liberal masses. Mostly for 2 reasons. The first is that they still believe that cops do good. They still believe in the fairy tale of the brave, honorable police officer who does a difficult job to the best of their abilities and simply calls balls and strikes and plays it down the middle, a neutral arbiter of law. The second is that they think that cops, judges, and prosecutors actually tell the truth and aren't corrupt liars at every turn and every level and at every possible opportunity. And both of these assumptions are incorrect in the worst ways that we can possibly imagine. Now, when the Taylor murder happened, it was clearly a botched no-knock raid, a type of home invasion which should obviously be illegal, or else at least heavily restricted due to the dangers it poses to those living in the home, being raided, and even to the criminal cops who enact it. For anyone who doesn't know the term, a no-knock raid is a search warrant which is served without warning. Normally, police need to knock and announce themselves before entering a home, even with a search warrant. A no-knock raid eliminates the knocking and announcing and allows the cops to just literally break down your door and charge in. Ostensibly, This is to protect officers' lives and even the suspects' lives, both achieved by the element of surprise. But the reality here is that cops just love dressing up in their armor and pretending to be special forces door kickers against people who have little or no reason to even fight back. Even, armed drug dealers don't tend to shoot at cops. You know why? Because doing drug time in prison is better than doing kill the cop time. They arm themselves for protection against other criminals. And when I said criminals there, I meant like street criminals, not the criminals with badges. So when the Breonna Taylor no-knock raid and murder happened, we talked about it. We meaning everyone who saw it. Leftists generally said, hold up, wait a second here. This is a murder. Why aren't we talking about this murder? And the more liberal and conservative types started doing mental gymnastics to make sense of it in their own minds. They, of course, relied on general accusations and half-truths. They, of course, pointed to rap sheets and pasts and rumors and just generally classist and racist stereotypes to justify the murders. And when news stories described Breonna Taylor as an emergency room technician with aspirations, they sloughed that off as framing. And then they described her as an uneducated thug, because of course they suck just that much. But the other thing that these people relied on was information from the police, in particular items from the search warrant and from police statements. And allow me a brief aside here, if you will. If you ever see a news article or hear someone talking about an incident involving the police, and anywhere in that article or the media report it says, according to police, or according to this statement from the police, or anything at all like that, please disregard that story. Any reporter using information provided by the police in an uncritical manner doesn't deserve their job. They lie all the time on these things. Whether bold-faced, by exaggeration, or by omission, the cops lie all the time to the media. We saw it in Uvalde. Go back and listen to my 2 Uvalde episodes for a little bit more, actually a lot more on that. In the Taylor murder, the police lied right from the beginning. Like literally before the raid even started. They submitted an affidavit to a judge for the no-knock warrant, full of very important and known lies. I want to be very clear here when I say this. This wasn't bad information that was later proven incorrect. It wasn't an error. The police knew these claims were false, that they were lies when they wrote the search warrant request. They definitely did it on purpose. Officers Janes and Meany intentionally lied. They left out material facts and information and had no probable cause to search the apartment where the police murdered Taylor. The most salient fact that the pro-cop people glommed onto was that Breonna's boyfriend, the real target of the police, was receiving packages at her home, allegedly full of drugs. The cops who wrote this into the search warrant knew for a fact that this was not true, and that it had never been true. They knew it beforehand. They lied. Another cop, Officer Goodlett, also conspired to write the false affidavit and then met with Janes after the botched raid and the murder to further conspire to feed false information to those investigating Taylor's murder. There are rumors that there is actually a recording of this conversation, which I guess we will find out if it's true or not in the coming trials. Goodlett actually just decided to plead guilty to her crimes, which led to the murder of Mrs. Taylor in that no-knock raid. Perhaps the first bit of truth that she has told in her role as a police officer. Oh, no, wait, hang on a second. She is a former police officer. So I guess they can tell the truth, but only once the badge is torn off of their chests. Janes wrote an investigative letter full of lies and then made multiple false statements to the investigators. He then tried to hurt the probe into his actions by filing falsified reports. Meany did much the same thing. Another officer named Harkinson, the coward cop who ran out of the apartment during the raid and blindly fired 10 rounds from his gun through a window and drawn curtains that he could not see through, endangering not only Taylor, her boyfriend, and the neighbors next door, but also his fellow cops, has also been charged with federal crimes, deprivation of rights under the color of law. Harkinson was charged with the same crimes at the state level, but was, of course, let off. Because he's a cop, and this is how these things work, especially at the state level. After all, who's going to re-elect a DA who successfully throws a cop in jail? We have to remember how powerful the police are, their union is, and how sympathetic the average voter is to the cops when we think about this. Convictions like this can destroy a DA's career, even a mayor's or governor's. And we need to remember this every single time we see a story like this and not reflexively defend the police because we actually think Mayberry is a real place and that cops are actually good people. Breonna Taylor was murdered by cops, and I hope even the staunchest defender of the police in this case can begin to see that. We have to. It's so goddamn important that we see this for what it is. Lying gang members hiding behind badges and social capital built off of an insane mythologizing and getting away with murder all too often. Now, there are probably some people hearing this who are like, hey, didn't the boyfriend shoot a cop during that raid that led to them shooting back? Yeah, he did. Because they kicked down his door in the middle of the night, woke him up, and created a scenario where he thought they were home invaders. This is why no-knock raids are so dangerous, especially when people are sleeping. Now, one last thing I want to talk about here, and take this a little bit broader and more meta, is that the affidavit full of lies, which led to the murder of Breonna Taylor, it actually got a no-knock warrant approved by a judge. And this is super important to talk about because it points to the lies of the cops, the corruption of the system, and the laziness of all of those involved. Think about this. In a 3-year period in Chicago, judges signed off on thousands of warrants to break into homes and search them for drugs. Nothing was found 95% of the time. Like literally nothing. No drugs, no weapons, nothing. And in these 95% of warrants, nobody was arrested. A quick Google search revealed some stories like this. They include 6-year-old and 9-year-old brothers being held at gunpoint with their parents and being told that they would be shot if they moved. Another home being broken into by these pigs and the family threatened that they would be, quote, shot in the fucking head, end quote, if they moved. In another case, a young mentally impaired girl was walked naked from her bath while being laughed at. Homes being torn apart, furniture, doors, and belongings being broken, overturned, and rummaged through. In one instance, we saw cops acting on a tip that a certain drug dealer who went by the name Ace was dealing drugs from a certain house, and they raided it, holding everyone at gunpoint and walking away empty-handed. It turned out that Ace had been in prison for months and was serving 20 years in prison. In Texas, a judge speed-signed a bunch of no-knock warrants based on the word of a confidential informant that eventually left 2 people dead and 0 heroin, the goal of the raids, was found. The cop who filed the paperwork later admitted that he made the informant up to get the warrant. It was all lies and 2 people died. In Georgia, a SWAT team conducting a no-knock raid on a home tossed a flashbang grenade into a baby's playpen. It exploded on the baby's pillow, severely injuring the child's face, who eventually had to be placed into an induced coma. The cops found no drugs or weapons at the house, and the informant who was relied on for the warrant lied to the cop, who never bothered to verify her account before getting the warrant signed by a judge. And the cop in the Georgia case who failed to do his job properly was acquitted in a trial despite all of that. So all of these stories are bad. The abuse, the destruction, the trauma. Think about how you would feel about cops when they kick your door down, point loaded guns at you, and threaten to blow your head off and you're 6 years old. And then they leave empty-handed because your family doesn't deal drugs and they had done absolutely nothing wrong. For the cops, that's the end of it. Just another day of being a criminal gang destroying poor people's lives and emotional stability. But for the families and people on the other end of that gun, this shit lingers. I gotta imagine. Shit, man, it lingers for me, and I'm only reading about it. But anyway, back to the judges. Why do they keep signing off on these search warrants? Why did one Chicago judge sign off on way more warrants than anyone else? Why do warrants full of lies keep getting signed at all? Why does no judge ask why 95% of these drug warrants come up with nothing? It's because judges are part of the problem. They're part of the problem systemically, and they're part of the problem individually. They don't actually care that cops lie. They just don't care. They want to look good for their people, whether elected or appointed. They want to be, on the good side of cops because all of the political and social stuff that I already talked about. In a world with Fourth Amendment protections against illegal search and seizure, there should never be search warrants signed within minutes of a cop arriving with the affidavit. There should be no such thing as a judge signing a warrant without any questions at all. And both of these things are quite common. They're the norm, in fact. The entire system has devolved from the probably too noble to have ever been real level of judges actually studying affidavits and verifying things, and it has fallen into, little more than a you wash my back, I'll wash yours sort of rubber stamp assembly line, that's like hidden behind a veneer of bureaucratic niceties and that the public can, look at and feel good about while ignoring how the search warrant sausage is actually made and how they lead to failure 95% of the time. And when the raids happen, there is no holding anybody accountable because the public just reads the media who reprint propaganda police statements about what happened as the absolute truth without ever asking anyone who was on the other side of that gun held by that liar holding a document signed by a coward. And here's the unsettling truth about this. We as a society rely on judges to protect us from illegal searches. The judges rely on police being honest. Do we see the problem here? And that's it for the episode today, guys. I thank you very much for listening. Please subscribe, like, comment wherever you are. Share on social media. buymeacoffee.com/Tribunus Plebis. You can find all of the links in the description. The Buy Me a Coffee page, you can donate one time or sign up for recurring monthly membership. Forgot the word there for a second. I think that's about it. Subscribe, like, share, buy me a coffee. Money doesn't hurt. I love you guys. Thank you all for listening. Peace.